Welcome back to Time with Tim. I'm Andy Carlson, and today I'm joined by Breanne Fletcher. She wears many hats in the Lyft community: supervisor, facilitator, director of Lyft Online Learning. But she's more than her titles. She's someone I admire deeply for her courage, intelligence, and that ridiculous sense of humor. I like the little eye roll there. Uh, Breanne is the daughter of Tim Fletcher, but her story is very much her own. She holds a master in counseling psychology, is a registered psychotherapist, and has walked through addiction, divorce, and personal trauma to become an advocate for healing and growth. She's also a nature loving, dog adoring, bike riding, world traveler who once hated her sister. And we'll maybe get to that later. And so in this conversation, we'll explore her life story and journey of healing, her experience as a leader in the Lyft program, and what's happening behind the scenes at Lyft today. Breanne, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. I'm Andy Carlson, and you're listening to the Time with Tim podcast. Each episode, we explore the impact of complex trauma through the personal journeys of our guests. Along the way, we'll connect with experts and individuals who share their unique perspectives, insights, and practical tools to help you on your healing journey. We know that you're Tim Fletcher's daughter. And so we all know that you had, he's a pastor and this complex trauma recovery expert. So you had a perfect childhood, no complex trauma in any way. So your life must have been perfect. Like, how did you end up in addiction? Like, what happened? What happened to you, Breanne?
That's a loaded question. Um, okay. Well, and it's so interesting because I think that's often kind of the initial uh, perception people have of me is, well, you're Tim's daughter. Why are you teaching this stuff? You don't actually know what it's like to sit in pain or to have a crappy childhood. And something I always like to share with people, I think it's important, is I'm not saying I had severe trauma on the spectrum, right? I wasn't living in physical abuse. I didn't have addiction surrounding me, anything like that. But and this is where I think in society in general, that's what we picture trauma as, and we don't see it in the other more subtle forms that it shows up. And yet, for the child, those subtle forms can still be really powerful and really damaging, and it can still shape kind of your identity and the way you develop and, shame and all of that stuff. So I just want to preface that, right? As I'm not saying like I had this huge trauma, but I still have my trauma. So I think, yeah, if we were to say Breanne has a perfect childhood, that's false, definitely. As nobody has a perfect childhood. But I mean, there are many different factors. I'll start with a few and you can stop me whenever you feel like it because I could go on for a long time. But one of the really impactful aspects of my complex trauma is that Tim got sick when I was only 1 year old. So, I was already born the third child. So, my parents were pretty busy. You're trying to raise all three of us under the age of 5. But when I turned 1, Tim got chronic fatigue syndrome. And so basically the entire dynamics in the household shifted and all of a sudden he was bedridden. He couldn't show up to about anything. And so then my mom had to take over and I'll get more into my mom later because she's probably the biggest factor of my complex trauma. But for me, because then it was my entire childhood, Tim couldn't he couldn't show up as a father in the way a kid needs a father to show up, to put it simply. So, it was always, tiptoeing around his illness. So when we were kids wanting to play and mom's running after us and telling us to be quiet, you can't have playtime, you have to go outside, and always kind of navigating that. So we couldn't just be kids in the sense that we wanted to or needed to. But also for me, and probably the biggest part of it was the sense of abandonment that I felt as a kid. Because I connected deeply with my dad. Anyone who knows me, if I'm being honest, will say I'm daddy's girl. And so when he could not show up for me, I felt that he didn't care. Now, as an adult, I know that has nothing to do with it, but as a kid, I didn't understand. So, for example, I was into a lot of sports as a kid and all through my teen years. And he could never show up. And all I wanted was for dad to show up to the one thing that meant a lot to me, the one thing, I enjoyed and was passionate about. And I remember just every time I'd, land in a baseball game or a volleyball game and looking out into the crowd and dad wasn't there. And every time when I still even think back to that, I can just feel that little pit in my stomach, just that sinking feeling, that disappointment, that hurt, which again would go into developing my shame that I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of dad showing up for me, kind of trying to navigate his day around something that meant a lot to me. And he was just staying at home in bed. And so that was a huge piece because while I could connect to him in some ways, because I talked with him a lot, I'm a chatter, in case he doesn't know that about me. But so I love to sit and talk with him. So I think I was able to develop some of an emotional connection. But in terms of, him being able to show up for me in those ways, he wasn't. So
Mm.
that was a big aspect of the childhood. But then the other one that cannot be ignored is mom. So basically, and Tim's talked about this in his videos, so I'm not spilling the beans here, but when Kim was young, she was very narcissistic. Not diagnosing her as a full-blown narcissist, but she had some very strong narcissistic qualities. And so basically, when Tim kind of went MIA on all of us, she then ruled the house. And she did not do it well. So it was very much revolved around her, what her wants were, what her emotions were. She was very dysregulated. So as soon as she was stressed, which she often was very stressed, she would just blow up. And so as kids, it became just an unsafe environment. Being around mom freaking out or mom kind of wanting things her way or the highway. It was a very just rigid kind of military style household. And so as a kid, I just really was hurt by her. I pushed her away. I was always frustrated. And then I developed a lot of repressed anger because I wasn't allowed to be angry around my mom. It was always smile and pretend everything's okay, right? That was her way of parenting because that's what she learned. And so I just didn't know what to do with all of my frustrations because I saw that she wasn't parenting in a healthy way. A lot of the things she was doing were not fair. They didn't make sense to me, but I had no way to express that. And I had nobody to kind of jump in and support. So, I think, the mum stuff, that one's a deep one. I've spent a lot of time working on it, but there was a lot of heartache, frustration, sense of powerlessness, I think, for me as a kid, that I had to deal with.
Could I ask you with that? So
Hmm.
this is something that I find interesting just about you and your family in general. So I know your mom and in my interactions with her, that's been the warm, caring, and even motherly. And but one of the things that I really admire about your family is that you don't look at or judge people through a shame lens. Like you've all done a lot of work, and so there's this kind of this shared capacity to own your part
Hmm.
without making each other bad. How do you move from that shame lens to more of that responsible lens? Like what for you has moved you from a place of possibly like more judgment to one of just kind of like recognizing a truth without a judgmental nature behind it?
Well, it's a complex question, isn't it? Because there's so many pieces that go into it. Because I think it takes a lot of internal healing to be able to even be in a place of non-judgment, because not judgment, or because judgment is based in shame, right? If I feel less than, I've got to judge everyone else around me so I feel better about myself. But I think, like, again, if I were to try and simplify it, two of the pieces. One would be that Tim was able to model that for us.
Mm.
So often out of complex trauma, we try to learn these new skills, but we've never seen it before. And so it feels impossible because you're like, yeah, you're telling me to do that, but I don't even know what step one is or how I would go about doing that. I've never seen it before. Whereas with Tim, one thing I've always admired about him is he's kind of had that compassionate, non-judgmental approach to people and just wanting to understand and kind of always, be able to look at the big picture of things and not just channel in on the one flaw. And so being able to see him do that over years, it's just like, yeah, that looks like a lot better way to deal with things than always being kind of just angry and bitter and resentful towards people, because where does that get anybody? Also not in a good place. But I think another thing that's helped is just all this complex trauma work, because I get it. I know, it's their own shame acting up. I know it's people's stuff going on. It's funny, I saw a reel just the other day. I forget who it was from, but he was saying, being emotionally intelligent sucks because you can't be mad at anybody anymore. Because every time you want to get mad, you're like, oh, but there was probably something to do with their childhood, or they were probably reacting to a trigger. But it's true, right? Because once you just start to understand that nobody's inherently bad, we're all just coming from a place of our own pain, it's really hard to blame somebody.
Mm.
Doesn't mean you don't put up boundaries, blah, blah, blah. But there's often, yeah, just it's easier to develop understanding and compassion instead of judgment. Doesn't mean I'm perfect.
Yeah.
I still have moments where I judge, but
Who I like kind of where you got there is there's a bit of like this being able to get to this place of compassionate, non-judgmental. But I thought it was like really important to reflect like the boundary as well. Is like, we can still hold people accountable, or we still do things to take care and protect ourselves.
right.
Um,
And I think too, like one other thing to that I would add, that I think is an important layer of getting to less judgmental place is like I said at the beginning, we've got to do our own work. But what people don't realize is often when we're judging others, it's out of our own triggers, right? Somebody triggers my shame, but when I'm unaware of it, I just react. And so that's where you can't just kind of set up these tools and say, I'm not going to judge people anymore, because once I'm triggered, all my tools go out the window. And so again, there has to be deeper healing going on our own shame, our own fears, our own insecurities, in order to then not react in those moments. And so again, that's still an ongoing journey for me. And often when I do catch myself judging, it's like, okay, but what's then going on inside of me? And why am I reacting this way? And that's a really important self-reflection question.
I want to turn back kind of to the kid. So the kid you, um, as you were going through this, did you have ways of coping or numbing the pain back then as a child?
Sure. I think probably the biggest one, well, there's be two. There'd be lots, but we'll start with two. Um, One was just busyness. I was really social as a kid. So, it was as soon as I was home from school, I wanted to be off with some more friends or doing something or off to sports or whatever it was. So I was very busy and kind of, I think once I realized that just home wasn't a happy place for me or a safe space, I was escaping that. So I always wanted to go over to a friend's. I never wanted to have friends over to my place because I wanted to find somewhere that, yeah, just got me out of that environment and kept me from the discomfort. So that was a big one. But then, of course, kids be kids, and we can't always be out at our friends. So I think another tool I went to is I read a lot. I would read for, 3 days straight and barely get off the couch during summer vacation or something if I got into some good books. So it was, and also we weren't allowed much TV as kids for a period. And so, yeah, I just read. I numbed, I escaped into fantasy world, into kind of a complete distraction. And that was my other coping mechanism as a young kid. Teens, of course, is a completely different era. But as a kid, when you don't really have tools or, as many escape options, you do what you got to do.
Like kind of when you were in this pain and your own pain and escaping, like were there people who noticed your pain, or did it feel like there's like nobody who could see what was going on inside for you?
I was a really good masker. I always have been. So I don't think anyone except maybe my dad saw. And I think that's why he still was able to kind of make some space for me to talk, to connect. And I remember always going into a room if I wanted to talk to him, and just knowing like if I had a secret, I would avoid him because I knew that he could see right through my bullshit real fast. And so he was the one who could always read me well. And I think he knew I was in pain, but he didn't at the time know how to help me out of it other than to just be there as much as he could. But in terms of anyone else, not really. I was able to hide that, and my mom was not intuitive at all at the time, so she didn't have a hot clue. But yeah.
Wow. And you kind of mentioned that, the looking out on the stage and then that kind of that disappointment, and there's some messages, like the message of abandonment of just him not being able to be there, but then this disappointment and some self-worth. Were there other shame messages or beliefs that you internalized at the time?
Um, well, yeah, definitely everything you just said. I think something else that's been a really strong thread in my life and would go back to around those times is just a deep fear of anyone not liking me, which would go to just not feeling, fully lovable, and kind of probably because the abandonment hurt so much at the time. So again, I could mask, I could be whoever anyone wanted me to be. I'm always the friendly, nice one. For the most part, I can make just about anybody like me. But in kind of my journey and where I'm at now, it's recognizing that that's not great, because often I'll sacrifice parts of myself to make people like me. But it goes to that core belief that if somebody doesn't like me, I'm going to be hurt or I'm not good enough. And so that's one that, yeah, I struggled with a lot as a kid, but continue to struggle with, if I'm being honest, is just I want everyone to like me. Um,
Mm.
so it's a hard one.
What do you do with that struggle? How do you talk to yourself? For what tools do you use, or what do you do different today when you have that sense of that kind of like that gasp, that needing to be liked that you just shared?
Um, it was interesting. Another thing I saw a reel for the other day. Gotta love those mental health reels. Um, and it was just saying give people permission to not like you. So not even trying to like react once they don't like you and how to work yourself through it, although I do that as well, but kind of just getting
Mhm.
to the forefront of it and saying permission not to like me, because I just want to be authentic. So that's a new one that I've picked up recently. But I think up until now, what I go to is inner child work. If
Mm.
somebody doesn't like me, or if kind of I'm afraid of an interaction, or if I find I'm over analyzing an interaction because it's like, oh well, did I say the right thing, or are they judge like, or did they go home? And people are talking about me, whatever it is, and I go back to that little girl, little Breanne, and let me tell you, she's fucking cute, and I adore her, and I try to remind her that what they think of you has absolutely nothing to do with how much you matter and your worth, and how much you deserve to be loved. And it's just, again, kind of that internal process of just reminding her that not everyone's going to like you. That's okay. You don't even like everybody. That's just part of being human. But just really affirming her fears, affirming her, yeah, insecurities, and having a dialogue with her when she's feeling that way.
So it's kind of doing a lot of reparenting and comforting and nurturing of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask too, so as a child, how did you make sense? Did you try to make sense of like his illness? Like we have such a capacity to be adaptive and to normalize what our experiences are. But like, is that something, did you know that something was going on, or that was different, or
I think, yeah, it's a good question, Andy. Because, of course, right, once we know it, it's hard to remember what it was like before we knew it because it just
Mm.
makes sense. But I think in general, like even a lot of the pain I was experiencing as a child, it was all repressed and I had no idea. I think I was just so busy going and going and going that I wasn't aware of what was going on. I do remember when I was around like 11 or 12, I kind of started experiencing signs of depression. Like I was just feeling really like flatlined and blah in my emotions. And I remember even at that time, my mom's like, what do we do? Do we get you on, antidepressants or take you to a doctor or get you a sun lamp or whatever? Because at that point, it was really manifesting and I was feeling, but that probably only lasted for, I don't know, maybe 6 months. And then
Mm.
whatever shifted in my life, I don't even know. I just kept going again. So honestly, like my pain in general, and I think part of this again is because of the subtleties of my trauma, I couldn't make a connection with it and I wasn't aware of
Mm.
it. And so much of it was under the surface that it wasn't until I really started my healing journey when things fell apart that I went, shit, I was carrying a lot of pain and I had
Mm.
no idea because I was
Mm.
running from it so hard. And I think a lot of people go through that, right? It's not until they hit their 20s, 30s, 60s even that they go like, oh, I had no idea because this was normal. And I
Mhm.
had no chance to reflect on it when you're disconnected from it and running all the time. So yeah, very unaware growing up, unfortunately.
It's amazing how invisible it is in the subconscious, when we look at other people and often it's just, oh, so and so has quirks. There's these little quirks, and then it's not until kind of you hit that wall later and begin your healing journey that you can find the root of those quirks. If you looking back now, like maybe at that age 5 or 8 or 11 here when you were depressed, like what did younger you need to hear in those years?
I mean, one, as cliche as it is, because I think we're always trying to remind ourselves of this, but I think that's for a very important reason. One thing I needed to hear was you're not alone, right? Because one way I've described my childhood, even kind of with the dynamics of my siblings, because some siblings bond together in trauma, whereas some go apart, and we went apart, is I always felt like I was alone on my own island, right? Because everyone was disconnected and all of that. So I think what I just needed to hear one was you're not alone in this. Because I think once we don't feel so alone, pain is a lot less overwhelming to face and to navigate. But again, going to that shame core belief, I think I just needed to hear that you're amazing, you're worth it, you're loved. Because I was trying so hard to prove that all the time that I just
Mm.
didn't believe it. And because I didn't hear it enough, at least not in a way that resonated with me or in a way that I was able to absorb.
So you mentioned your siblings. What were your sibling dynamics like as a child?
Yeah. Um, Again, another complex one because there were three of us. So my brother was the oldest, and then my sister, the middle child, and then there was me. So I've spent much time analyzing this, as we do. Right around when I was born is the time that my dad got sick. So I think, especially my brother, resented me because I was taking attention away from dad when he needed it the most. And although part of that was due to the sickness, I think he directed a lot of that resentment towards me. So, right from the beginning, my brother and I were very separate. I've never really had a relationship with him, which is interesting then because he was kind of the older male. I longed for his acceptance. So there was another abandonment wound that happened there and a rejection wound. And so growing up from childhood all the way through my teens, I was always trying to impress my brother, always just trying to get him to notice me, to talk to me, to be kind to me. But I think the more I pushed that needy, you kind of get the anxious and avoidant attachment, the more he just wanted nothing to do with me. And so my brother and I, we would go weeks without even talking. And, when we did talk, he was often very, very mean to me. And I'm not blaming him. He was going through his own trauma, and I was just the annoying sister chasing after him. But it was really painful because all I wanted was my brother's love. And it was the one thing that felt so out of reach for me. So there was that dynamic with my brother. And then my sister was the invisible child. So she kind of just faded into, the background. And her and I are very different too. So she's artistic, she's musical, she's quiet and chill, whereas I wanted to go play sports and hang out with my friends, extroverted, introverted, artistic, not artistic. That's definitely not me. And so we also had nothing really to connect on. So I think when we were younger, like we could sit and play dolls, sure. But especially when we got into the teen years, she
Mm,
went kind of the Christian direction because, we were pastors' kids, whereas I was rebelling. And I was
mm,
following in my brother's footsteps because I was like, he's cool. I'm gonna go do what he does. So there was that. So then there were other dynamics to that too, whereas, yeah, I just started to hate her. And
mm.
so with my brother, there was zero connection because he hated me, even though I really wanted him. Whereas my sister, I hated her and I wanted nothing to do with her. And so, yeah, it was, we were not close as siblings. But again, it's painful looking back because I think about how helpful it could have been in the dynamics if we had come together to support each other, right? If you at least had that sibling to turn to talk to. And I did not. I didn't connect with either of my siblings. So that's what those dynamics were like.
And kind of with that lack of connection, you mentioned kind of some of these, just the different characteristics or personalities. Were there other things that led to that lack of connection between the two of you?
Between my sister and I,
Yeah.
um,
Like things that made it difficult to come together for connection, like you just mentioned.
yeah, like I think part of, it's a good question. Part of my desire to always be loved by everybody, right? Like we talked about, is I wanted to be one of the cool kids, right? And I was friends with the cool kids, which sounds so cringe. I hate that. But so part of that then I didn't want to be with the losers. This is horrible. But I'm being vulnerable today. And she would have fallen into, the nerdy music band kids category, the artsy kids. And so part of me was just this like, I don't want anything to do with you. You're not cool. You're not
Mm,
drinking and partying with us. You go to church for fun. You go play band. And it was so superficial. But that's where I
mm,
was at because that's where my value was placed. My value was placed in kind of what's cool to the outside world. And I can only align with that because if I align with anything else, then it's going to drop me down a peg or, yeah, I'll lose a certain sense of value. So I think part of it was just, yeah, being so caught up in those social rankings and terrified of losing that. So, yeah, I think that was a huge piece. And then I do think like the Christian piece was really dividing for us because, again, she looked down on things like drinking. She tattled on me a few times, when she knew I was smoking and she went and told my parents. So that created a huge wedge between us. And so it was, I couldn't stand her, but then she was also kind of, yeah, I mean, she was doing what she knew to do. I don't blame her now for it, but at the time, whoo, was I mad.
mm. Yeah, it sounds like there's a bit of this competitiveness, not necessarily like directly with each other,
Mm.
but as you were talking about like the social rankings, so there's this competitiveness of you have to look good in a certain way, but then here with her tattling on you, like those are the ways that she's looking good as well. And so there's this kind of this underlying need to be competing against others, competing for worth, maybe.
Yeah, that's a really good insight because I think like a piece that I missed out on is because there was my older brother and then two girls, is my mom often treated us like the same person.
Mm,
So she would get us matching gifts, even though we were completely different personalities. She would make us dress in matching clothes because my mom was a twin, sidebar. And so I think she was trying to like she loved being a twin. So I think she was just treating us the same. So I also think, so it was always like Phil and the girls, right? We were just lumped together. And so I think within that, we'd lost some of our identity and we were resentful towards always being together and lumped together.
Mm-hmm.
And so probably absolutely it was trying to break out of that, but out of kind of the way our mom treated us, instead of being mad at our mom, although we had our own stuff with our mom, we also turned that on each other, even though we had no control over that. And so it was, yeah, that loss of identity or being too connected, enmeshed in that relationship, and wanting to, yeah, not only get out of it, but then, like you said, compete, right? Who's better? We were kind of set up for that.
Mm-hmm. I can see like that divergence between the directions that you take when you explain kind of the twins and needing your own identity, how that can unfold more. Could you chat? You mentioned like that, the image of being a pastor's family, and so it sounds like you went off in a very different direction. Could you talk about what it is like to be the child of a pastor, or like the image that's related to that, like how that may show up, how that affects you?
Yeah, I can't miss that one. Hey, that's it's an important topic. Short answer, it sucks. I mean, there's a reason. Like, I don't know if anyone's heard, but like they talk about being the PK, right? Being the pastor's kid, and so many pastors' kids rebel because it's basically what is it like? It's a lot of pressure, right? You're already in the spotlight as a young kid when you didn't choose it, and when it has nothing to do with kind of the value system you created for yourself. You're just, again, lumped in with somebody and assuming that, oh, you must have all the same beliefs as your dad, or you must be a good Christian girl because you're the pastor's kid and you're representing the family. So, unfortunately, my mom, especially because she came out of very kind of like legalistic Christianity, she was very strict. And so she did, not only subtly but very directly, she put a lot of that pressure on us. So we had to, put on our dresses before church. We couldn't step a toe out of line. And then we were also at church all the time. We had to go to church for Friday night youth group. Then we had to go to church on Sunday and be the first ones there. And then sometimes we went on Tuesday nights for I don't even remember what. But it was like at such a young age to not have a choice about what you want to do in a religious or spiritual direction and have that imposed on you, but then with that extra pressure of being a representative of that, it was a lot. And so yeah, I think, I went through a phase, especially when I was young, where I was like, all right, I'll be the good Christian girl. I'll go to, Bible camp in the summer and be a camp counselor and do all of those things. But I think eventually when I kind of hit an age where I started thinking for myself more, I just went in the opposite direction because I didn't know how to find a middle ground or really do anything yeah, figure out what I wanted. It was like, okay, this equals bad. So I'm going to go over here and kind of just, because I had, again, more repressed anger, it was just
Mm-hmm.
push it away as hard as I can. And so I basically did everything and anything I could to be the anti-pastor's kid. And yeah, just go against that value system.
Could you explain more? I think you hit it a bit here, but like when you talk about like a legalistic Christian, what does that look like? Kind of what does that show up like? What's that role, that dynamic?
Um, yeah, it's, and my mom would probably explain this even better because I think she had it even more legalistic than I did.
Mm,
But it's strict is the best word. So just strict
mm,
Christianity, right? So again, you cannot miss church on Sundays, otherwise that's a sin. We couldn't. This one drove me crazy. We couldn't even listen to secular music, as my mom called it. Ooh, that still makes me cringe a little bit because, well, it's not Christian. So even like, yeah, media we were exposed to, you couldn't. Like, I remember when I was in, I don't know, grade 6, I got an Avril Lavigne CD, but she said "damn" once in the CD, and I was terrified that my mom was gonna find it because I'd already seen her like rip up some or break some of my brother's CDs because there were swear words in it.
mm,
We couldn't. I remember once she made this. She'll kill me for saying this, but she made this huge like rules list in the house, and one of the rules was words you cannot say. Swears were obvious, but we couldn't even say things like shoot, like shoot.
mm,
No, that's too close to shit. So you mean you're
mhm,
trying to say shit, so that's bad too. Couldn't say, oh my gosh, oh no, that's too close to oh my God.
Mm,
Couldn't say dang because that's too close to damn. So just so rigid and strict. We couldn't watch a lot of TV shows. Like I remember as a kid, Sailor Moon was cool. Hey, millennials out there. But Sailor Moon, no, no, no. Those are witches. And witches are evil because they're from the
mm-hmm,
devil. So you can't
mm-hmm,
watch Sailor Moon. And I remember going to school and all my friends would be talking about Sailor Moon. And I'm like, sorry, I have no idea what you're saying because my mom's crazy. Like it was just, it felt crazy to me because again, these rules, they didn't make sense in my mind because they
mm-hmm.
weren't aligning with, yeah, anything I believed. So that would be it. And then again, like I couldn't take a Friday off of youth group to just go hang out with my friends or do what I wanted to do. No, no, you have to go to the church event. If there's a church event, we have to be there. So it was just very, very strict in many ways.
Yeah, strict. It sounds like there's like a kind of a lot of black and white thinking as well, and also a bit of like a stripping of humanity of kind of recognizing the fullness of humanity with it, with like all the rules and everything that's banned there.
Hmm.
You've spoken about kind of like the pressures a few times, and you've mentioned anger as being something that needed to be suppressed. Were there other emotions that were off limits or not safe to show?
That's always interesting to me to reflect back on that because, yeah, I'd say anger, definitely not. Um, but even, and I mean, I think with sadness, she was okay at times if she felt it was justified. So, if a
Mm,
pet died, I could cry about that, sure.
hmm
But I think, if you were getting upset or crying about things that she didn't have patience for, you couldn't do that either. Fear, it was no, just get over it, or, yeah, don't be afraid, and trying to just talk it through, not in a good way, was not allowed. But to me, always the irony in it is that she was allowed to feel any of the emotions she wanted.
Mm,
She was
hmm
angry all the time. She lived in fear, so she had all sorts of fear
mm,
going on. Often her reactions were very fear based. And
hmm
so, again, for a kid, it's like one thing when you hear a rule if everyone's following it, but when you watch somebody doing the opposite, it's not logical. So yeah, I think the anger would still be the biggest one. And I know in my teens that started seeping out, but then it would just turn so messy and we'd get into huge fights. But it's like I couldn't hold it in anymore. Whereas as a kid, yeah. Um, but it's funny because even then with anger, when I went into recovery, I think I had I had repressed my anger so well that I remember going through anger week. So yeah, for those who don't know, in our program, you do a whole week on anger. And I remember sitting there going, well, this one doesn't actually apply to me, guys, because I don't have anger. Because again, happy masking, I'm good. I don't have the anger stuff. And it wasn't until I repeated that week when I went through phase two again that I remember just hit me like middle of my face. And I was like, holy shit, I am a passive aggressive bitch because I had so much anger, but it was showing up in the non traditional form of anger. Like, you'll never catch me yelling at anyone. Still to this day, that's just not my style. That's not how my anger shows up. And so that's what I pictured anger as. And so that was easy to say, I'm not angry. And yet, once I was able to start recognizing how anger seeped out of me in these little jabs and these cuts and like kind of all passive aggressive, I was like, there is a lot of anger there. And still to this day, I can connect with, I'll notice it. I'll be like, haha, there it is. What am I angry about? But yeah, I think I always try to even teach clients about that is that's still anger. And you still need to look at that. Just because it doesn't look explosive doesn't mean you don't have anger.
Yeah. I want to come back to that, but I want to ask a question first, kind of like with this double standard on emotions. Was it clear or were you aware at the time that it was a double standard, or was this like distorted in some way so that her anger wasn't anger, her fear wasn't fear, or or did you recognize at the time that there was this fear, that there was this anger?
I think when I was young, I wouldn't have had like the self awareness or just, ability to think in that way. But I think by the time I hit teens, maybe even a little bit earlier, I was able to start recognizing the double standard.
Mm,
But again, it was distorted because it was like, well, I'm the
mm,
parent and I have a right to be angry because you're not listening. Or I'm the parent and, she could explain anything away.
mm,
And unfortunately,
mhm,
with dad, we've had this discussion a few times. It's like, where was dad in all of this? Because he should have been able to step in and say, like, yeah, no, but he was absent. He was off in a different room. He wasn't in the car with us and all of these
mm,
things. So she was getting away with all these outbursts. And again, explaining it away using the authority position to kind of allow it or justify it. And then no one was there to validate us in our confusion and frustration that this isn't okay. So, yeah, I don't think I was fully aware till I was a teen, but I think on some level, subconsciously, it was never making sense.
mm, mhm. Would you explain that explaining away is would that be what you'd call gaslighting today?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this isn't anger. This is I'm right to be feeling this.
Right. Or this is because it's your fault because
It's
you made
because
me
it's your
angry and
fault.
you didn't
Yeah.
listen to the rules or
Mm,
whatever it is. So, again, and I think that's where I still struggle with some false guilt sometimes is when
mm,
somebody's feeling an emotion in a room and I pick up on it. My first kind of gut reaction is, what did I do?
mm,
I didn't do
mhm,
anything. But that was trained into me as I had to feel responsible for mom's reactions.
mm.
And so I still face that one sometimes.
I want to ask you another question on anger and then kind of jump back towards your teenage years again. But so you've talked a little bit about this, but like how has your relationship with anger changed over the years? What have you done to maybe reclaim healthy anger and directness coming from that more passive aggressive? Uh, I'll say it. I'll say it. I held back instead of being a passive aggressive bitch. How did how did
Rude,
you?
Andy.
How have you reclaimed healthy anger and directness?
Well, that's one of those things. It's an ongoing journey because I still struggle with directness. Confrontation and conflict is
Mm,
still difficult for me. So I would still say sometimes the passive aggression can pop up. But the way I've still been able to reclaim or change that in huge ways. So one would be that I'm aware of it. Honestly, like even if it's, a side comment I'm making to my sister about how she stacked the dishwasher, that's a whole thing. Irrelevant. It's like, oh shit, why is this bothering me today? And why am I now making comments about it when yesterday I was fine? So it's the opportunity to be self-aware and then self-reflect, right? Like, oh, I'm extra tired today. So this is all like this is where my anger is coming from, right? This isn't a valid anger. She hasn't done anything wrong. This is me just feeling more irritable and tired. So it's like then I can filter that anger out. Or there are other times when I'm angry and this is what I always try to get clients to do is because anger is a secondary emotion, what else is going on for me? So, am I actually feeling shame? Am I actually feeling afraid of something? Because those are two big ones, right? That anger can try to protect. Or am I feeling hurt and don't want to look at my own pain? And so sometimes, yeah, if I'm angry at somebody or angry about something, it's like, okay, but is there another emotion going on underneath that? And can I look at this instead? And usually, as soon as I shift out of the anger, again, it kind of just diffuses because I'm like, I'm not angry about this. I just didn't want to look at how I'm hurt. Um, so that's a big one. And then, yeah, I think with kind of a healthy anger, because again, so often we think that if I get healthy, I won't feel anger because it's a negative emotion. But anger is a healthy emotion. So at times it's okay going, okay, no, there is a reason for this. My love has been violated, justice has been violated, trust has been violated, some of those reasons that healthy anger pops up. So then it's just shifting and saying, okay, what can I do with this? Does a boundary need to be set? Do I need to just sit in this one and wait a little bit? And just trying to navigate what my anger is trying to tell me if it's kind of the primary emotion in that situation. So I know it's all easier said than done, don't get me wrong, but I think if I were to just summarize that, it's self-awareness. recognizing that the anger is actually there, because in passive aggression you're not even aware, it's on a subconscious level. So just recognizing like, oh, this is some anger, and then being able to pick apart what kind of anger is this and what can I do with it.
Like that. I think there's like, I hear kind of two layers, and there's one that you've repeated here a bit, but like the the first layer is kind of recognizing that anger is a healthy emotion, and that it's okay to feel it. And then the other is just that acknowledgement. So often we kind of like split from our emotions, and then we project them onto others or blame them onto others. And so in a way to really reclaim and take ownership of our own pain, and to have that responsibility for it. I mean, I guess that's the only way. That's the only way to begin healing it, is to own it and to feel it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
think often, like in another common cause of anger, right? Or if we just are mad at somebody, it's what are they mirroring that's a part of me I don't like about myself. And so often that's something, and then it's like, oh, so I'm just mad at me, or I just have to look at myself, and that diffuses it pretty quickly too, if you're willing to look at it.
Yeah. So I want to move into kind of like your teenage years. So maybe as a teenager and a young adult, could you talk about how these experiences, beliefs, shames, like started to show up maybe in your choices, relationships, work, substances?
Yeah, pretty traditional for many teenagers, right? We all go through a rebellious period. Um, so I think when I was 14 or 15, again, I really pulled away from the family even more because I had more, independence and kind of, again, being obsessed with being part of the social groups that I thought would bring me value. And so around that age, the drinking started. It was it wasn't super heavy yet at that point. But I think when I was 15, I smoked weed for the first time. And that was my escape. I just remember the way it hit, the way everything, all the stresses in life seemed to melt away, kind of disconnecting from any of the pain that I was or wasn't aware of. And so pretty quickly I got into a bad habit with weed, to the point where I was smoking every day. I was skipping school. I spent the whole evenings out with friends just smoking. And so then when I was 16 or 17, my dad found out because, like a really smart teenager, we were just always smoking in my car, hotboxing it. So, shocker, dad went to move my car one day out of the driveway, figured it out pretty fast. And so then because he was working at an inpatient center at the time, he told me he was going to give me a drug test in 2 weeks, which is, the time that weed leaves your body. And if I wasn't clean, there'd be some serious consequences. And I think at that point, my brother had already been kicked out for smoking weed. So I
Mm.
knew he wasn't messing around. So I quit cold turkey. And then at that age as well, I was already working. Like I got my first part-time job when I was 11, because back in the day you could do that. I sound old when I say that, but so by 15, I was working in restaurants in the restaurant industry. And then by 16, right around this time, I was basically working full time while in school. And so this
Mm.
became my next source of addiction, basically, which, you know, I think unfortunately a lot of people don't look at workaholism and addiction in the addiction realm because it's societally acceptable. It's like, wow, what a hardworking 16-year-old. Look at you go. But it
Mhm.
was, morning till night. I was either at school or working. And, I found a social group there. And also in the restaurant industry, you drink a lot. So there was a lot of drinking and smoking and all of that stuff. And so it was just another fun escape. A lot of chaos in a restaurant. You're running all the time, the whole shift, making money, which at the time was really fun for me. Um, so basically, from then on, I'd say the workaholism was present straight through until around 25, 26 when I moved to Germany, which is another story we'll get to. But yeah, once I was finished high school, then I was working two pretty much full-time jobs, 7 days a week, 14, 16-hour days. So I was just always working. And it was fine for me because I enjoyed the work and, again, kind of some of the partying that goes with that as well. And then in the midst of all of that, I started dating a guy when I was 18. And nobody had really taught me, as nobody does, but I mean, out of complex trauma, I didn't understand what a healthy relationship was. And so I kind of just jumped into this first opportunity because it was like, oh, look, here's love and approval and acceptance in the way that I thought it was supposed to be. And so I stayed with that guy, and by 21, we were married. Now, I will say, and this is obviously my own opinion, but don't get married so young, people. It's not a good idea. You don't know yourself yet. I mean, I was a kid. I had no idea who I was. And then to go from 18, then into this relationship is like we were trying to, mature together, but we had no space to discover ourselves. And so, yeah, by 21, I was married. I was still working a lot through all of this. But we got married and, honeymoon stage, it was all fine at first. But, pretty quickly, we realized that we had no idea how to be in a relationship. And I just then fled more into work. It was like every time there was an event he wanted me to go to, I'd go and pick up a shift and be like, sorry, gotta work, make money. And so I just avoided the relationship through working. And then, I think once I got into my 20s, I started drinking a lot more heavily as well. Because of all of that, which again, I was not aware of at the time. It just seemed like a normal thing to do. And I was around people who did it as well. So I didn't realize until afterwards that I was escaping, that I was numbing, that I was avoiding, and all of that stuff. So yeah, we got married. But then when I was around 24, 25, I think I was already aware. I became aware that the relationship wasn't working. So I thought a really good solution to it would be like, hey, let's move to Germany together. This will be fun. Because I had gone to Germany when I was 18 for 6 months and really fell in love with the country. I started learning the language at university and all of that stuff. So at 24, we picked up and moved to Germany. But we didn't land in the same city because I was doing an exchange through university in a small town. So he had to go get a job in a bigger city. And so then the relationship just completely fell apart because we were apart for a year. And it was a really pivotal year for me, I think, not in a good way, but probably like into my downward spiral because all of a sudden I had no work. Because you just go to university there. So my biggest coping mechanism was gone. I had no support network. My husband was in a different city. I wasn't close with any of my family members at the time. And I just basically moved away from all of my friends and connections. So I was completely alone, completely dealing with all of these things that were starting to creep up, recognizing that my relationship was falling apart. So that year, definitely the party life became my main escape. And there was just, a lot of that going on. And this is when probably the drinking got really bad because I would start drinking until I blacked out. Otherwise, it was not really a good night unless I could wake up and go, I don't remember what happened. And so, that year, sure, it was fun on the surface, but in hindsight, it's pretty sad and depressing. And then after that year finished, we tried moving back in together and it lasted about 3 weeks and then we split up. So then I just kept my downward spiral going in a bigger city with more party options until about a year and a half later. Again, super cliche, but I woke up and after a really rough night, the night before, I said, this is not okay anymore. I can't keep doing this. And I called my dad.
I ask with with the work and the alcohol? Did it feel like you were like running from something or trying to feel something?
I do think there was a sensation of running
Mm,
because like especially like around like once I got into like heavier drinking and I started smoking weed again in those years. Um every day. But it it was like when I didn't have a substance, it was almost like a desperation to get to the substance. So running
mm,
through the workday to run home and grab something. And it was starting again, it was all starting to creep up. And I started to become aware that, yeah, this is getting out of my control. I desperately need something to escape this or to numb this. And I couldn't even be in my own body anymore without, yeah, feeling uncomfortable. And so, yeah, I think that was definitely awareness around running. I think going to Germany, I knew on some level it was running. It was kind of like a last ditch effort. Like, if we just reset our lives, things will clear up. So let's run from everything here because it's not working. Um, but obviously that didn't work either. So, yeah, I think in those years, I was starting to become more and more aware. And then, of course, the more it spiraled, the more the feelings pile up, the more you can't really ignore the signs that I was in
mhm,
constant flight mode, and that I was trying to escape something.
mm. Was some of this like kind of related to the codependence, to like that people pleasing or over responsibility and having been in a relationship at such a young age?
You know, my relationship often confuses me because, yeah, I
Mm,
have very strong or had very strong codependency. But like in high school, I was never the type of person who was trying to get a boyfriend. Like
mm,
I could care less. So interestingly, I think more of my codependence shows up in friendships.
mm,
Because to me, and I could go back all the way to, my best friend when I was 5, who I actually we were friends for about 20 years. Um, and I think my best friend always had more value to me. So yeah, and again, looking back at the relationship with my ex, I don't like, we often talk about like in codependency, we can flip roles based on the dynamic of the relationship, right? So while in some relationships, I believe I take on the anxious attachment, with him, I was avoidant. I think there was
mm,
always a disconnect with us, and that I didn't feel fully connected to him, or I didn't really care. I don't like, I think I just didn't really care. Hence, I dragged his ass to Germany, even though I don't think he wanted to go. I was more narcissistic in those years, is that I
mm,
kind of wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I didn't really care about the relationship. But I do notice, like now, codependency, even like for those. I mean, nobody knows this, I guess, but I live with my sister. Um, and if anything, it shows up more in that because it's the relationship I actually value the most and would therefore trigger the deepest fears of abandonment.
mm,
Whereas I don't think I valued my marriage. And so now it's like I'll feel the kind of reactions or the fears of confrontation or false guilt if she's having an emotion because I'm can catch the codependency more in this
mhm.
relationship because I think of the value it holds.
I actually want to come back to your sister and your relationship with her later. Earlier when you talked kind of like about the connecting to the inner child of you, and you have this like very strong and positive relationship with her and really nurturing and caring. Like when you look back to this person of you like this between 18 and 25-ish, like do you have compassion for that version of you as well and what she was trying to go through and what she was trying to manage?
Now I do. Um, I think I went through a period where, yeah, I blame. I don't know if I blamed her, but just kind of thought like, "What the fuck were you doing, bro?"
Mm,
um, but absolutely, now I just recognized she had no clue. She was looking for whatever could help her survive with what she knew how to do, and um, yeah, I forgive her. And I think too, like being at a place in my life where I do feel in a good space. Even though I went through pain and didn't make the best decisions along the way, I recognize that every step of that got me to where I am today. So I don't actually live with regrets around that period of my life because it's part of my journey. And so I don't blame her for it. I have compassion.
And as you were kind of going into this spiral and all this desperation, were there other emotions that were coming up kind of when the coping strategies stopped working?
Uh, I dealt with a lot of anxiety in those years.
Hmm.
So I remember the first time I experienced a panic attack. I was in university, and like a good complex trauma kid, I had not done everything. I had procrastinated, and all of a sudden I had like a bunch of assignments and a bunch of work shifts and whatever else was going on in my life. And I remember just like curling up on the floor and just like having a panic attack. So at the time, and again, I think this is where it reflects my lack of self-awareness. It was like, why would I be having anxiety? I don't have any mental health issues. I'm fine. Like, where did this come from? So I was really shocked by that. Um, but so then I just tried, at the time, I would do like those, meditation coloring books or just find different ways to try to deal with that. But I remember at the time, even my dad had started doing some of like this work and saying like, "Oh, you could watch some of these videos on complex trauma. It might relate." And I was like, "Nah, I'm good. That's not me. I'm fine." I remember telling my husband at the time that he should watch them because I saw his complex trauma or dysfunction at the time is all I could label it as. But I honestly didn't think I had any mental health issues or anything to look at. So yeah, that anxiety, it was never really debilitating in the sense that I didn't live with it every day. I didn't kind of have anything over the top anxiety attacks, but there were a few moments in my life, basically when the pressures built really high, that I had a few panic attacks. Once in Germany near the end of my spiral as well. I just had so much on my plate. I remember crumbling on the ground. So yeah, it showed up at times, but it's just so funny because I kind of just
Hmm.
ignored it.
Hmm.
Oops.
Yeah, and you mentioned pressure. I think one of the things that I've realized when we talk about like complex PTSD, a lot of times we talk about a lot of things, but like that the word stress, PTSD, a post-traumatic stress disorder, and so tensions, urges, impulses, pressures. And so it sounds like there's a lot of stress that was built up in your life as well.
Definitely. And it's funny because as I reflect on like the concept of stress in my life, one thing that if anyone from the outside were to look in, they'd say, "Wow, you're so good at dealing with stress, Breanne." Like, for example, I'd be working at a restaurant and it'd be like one of the craziest days. Everyone is losing their minds, screaming at each other, blah, blah. And I would be walking around cool as a cucumber. So I think part of the reason for that is because growing up, it was when my mom got stressed that she got dysregulated. So, like a good swinging from one extreme to the other, CT kid, I associated that stress was bad. So maybe this is another emotion, I guess, that I never allowed myself to express because stress was bad. So I will do anything and everything to not feel that or
Mm,
express it. And so through that, and I think this is where the anxiety came from, is I just repressed. I would never let anyone know that I was stressed because that was a shame thing. That was a negative thing
mhm,
because it meant you were weak. And so I was very good at managing, um, shutting down my stress response, and just putting it down, which is why I think the anxiety came out because I squished until there was no room left, and then it would just pop up in an episode. But yeah, stress was definitely a no-no emotion for me.
when things kind of finally like really fell apart and you recognized that you needed help, like what was it like to call your dad and then tell him that you needed help?
It was shitty. Um, it was just the shame and embarrassment
Mm,
of having to call, and I was in Germany at the time, so I'm calling from half a world away after they had come to visit like 6 months before, and I had acted like I had everything together, and that I was living my best life in Germany, things were going well. So to call and say like, Ha, just kidding. My life was falling apart. There was just a lot of embarrassment. But interestingly, like making the call was hard, but once the words were out and my dad was able to just respond with so much understanding and compassion, that felt good. That felt really good because, like we were saying before, what did I need to hear? That I wasn't alone. I think after I'd been really alone for years, for the first time, I felt like, oh, he's not judging me. He's not mad at me. He doesn't give a shit about what I've done. He just wants to help. And oh, so I'm not alone in all of this. And it was, despite it being a really painful memory of having to make that phone call, it was also a really powerful memory based on how he responded and was able to accept me where I was at.
Did that moment like kind of teach you anything about asking for help or letting go or surrender?
Yeah. Because I think in general, I've always struggled to ask for help.
Mm,
Many from complex trauma do, right? But it's that no, I can figure it out, or I don't want to look weak, or I don't want to be a burden on people. And so I think what it taught me is that people who genuinely care, they want to help you. And they're not sitting there with their judgments or anything like that. They just want to help. And don't get me wrong, not everyone's like that. That's where you have to pick your people and find the right people. And I am lucky that, I have a dad who could show up for me like that because I know so many people don't have a parent to turn to. But yeah, it just taught me that if they really care, of course they want to help and they will be there.
how did this shift your relationship with your dad or with yourself?
Well, I think with my dad, it just reconnected us. Because kind of like I alluded to before, like as a kid, even though there were times of abandonment, we still always had an emotional connection, and
Mm,
he still did feel like a safe person for me. So
hmm
I think kind of after I'd pulled apart, I mean, I got married and, I was trying to find my people elsewhere, but it just kind of reassured and reconnected um, that, oh, yeah, he's still there. He's always been consistent. And just that, yeah, deep care, I guess, for me in terms of the relationship with myself. I think that was just the beginning of the journey. So I don't know if that conversation itself shifted much, but I
mm,
guess at the same time, I was willing to finally take care of myself instead of treating
mm,
myself like crap. And so finally able to stand up for myself and say, I need help and I deserve help. So that would be the beginning of, yeah, a long
mm,
journey.
mm. Yeah. And can you tell us about that journey? Like what happened, after this call?
Sure. So basically, I told my dad I needed help, and he said, "Okay, we'll get you on a flight back to Canada," because I knew I couldn't recover properly in Germany. I was too far away. The resources were just not what I needed them to be. And, my dad was running these programs called React that were all about addiction and complex trauma. So he's like, why don't you come to one of our programs? And so they flew me to BC, where my sister was running the second program that they had launched in Surrey, BC. And so, interestingly, this is also where kind of the relationship with my sister restarted. Here, we'd hated each other for like 2 decades. And I was like, hi, do you want to come rescue me and take care of me? And again, she showed up, no judgment, like so much care
Mm,
with the biggest heart. She basically, for the first year, just homed me, fed me while I recovered. But yeah, I went back. I quit everything cold turkey, alcohol, weed, and cigarettes. And so I kind of spent a week doing some detox, and then I joined the program in Surrey. So the one there is a 12-week program, and you go through, again, there are pieces on addiction, right? Kind of like relapse prevention and, um, learning some tips and tools. But the majority of the program is what's underneath the addiction. And so that one I remember the very first day I went in, and in the in-person programs, you do more listening while the teachers teach you. And so I just listened to all these things, and just all these, it was just like hitting all of these wounds that I'd been hiding for so long all at once, that I left the very first day. I sat in the car and I burst into tears. Like, I bawled. Like, they had touched on too many wounds too fast. They hadn't, but it just was so painful. And so I just bawled in the car, and my sister just sat with me. And but at the same time, although it was so incredibly painful, puzzle pieces were instantly being put into place. And it was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, yeah, that's me. I get that. Oh, so that's why I do that. And it was just so painful and empowering at the same time. And so I think I missed one day in that entire 12 weeks because I was just soaking it all in. And I would do my coaching once a week, also one-on-one individual coaching. And I remember every session, I would just let it all out. I would cry my face off. We did lots of inner child work. That's when I got to know little Bree. And I really was able to go through the emotional process of, the beginning of the emotional process of what healing is. And then another big part of that journey for me was processing the anger with my mom. And so this was actually really hard to do, but I remember writing her a letter about halfway through my time in React and saying, I can't talk to you for a while. Because I needed space. I needed space to feel what I was feeling from the past without having the present muddling it. And so I just set a boundary with her, and I said, I need time. And luckily she'd already done enough healing at that point that she was very gracious about it and just gave me space. But yeah, I was able to kind of unpack a lot of that relationship. I unpacked a lot of the relationship with my brother, with my dad, and just, start to heal wounds that had been sitting under the surface my whole life. And then I came out of it, and I mean, that's the next part of the story, but it was intense. It was exhausting. I napped every day after class. I would finish class and run home and dive into my bed and have a really good nap, because it's the emotional world that so many of us have never tapped into. And then you're just, it's an emotional exhaustion, certainly not a physical exhaustion, but it was a really powerful experience.
With that emotional exhaustion, what were some of the hardest and most healing parts of that journey?
I think exploring childhood through an emotional lens. So many of us can look back on our childhood and say, this happened when I was 5, this happened when I was 10, this is what the dynamics were like when I was this age and whatever. And we do it all from here. But to actually sit, and this is where, especially in my coaching, it helped because I had space to just sit. But to actually, and this is where inner child work it's a really good bridge between your head and your heart, and being able to connect with not the emotions you feel now looking back on it, but the emotions you felt at the time. And those are the emotions that are stuck in our bodies and stuck in, who we are and who we continue to be. And so to be able to, through that little girl, go back and feel the pain she felt when she was 5, or feel the pain she felt when she was 9 and looked out and dad wasn't there, and actually just sit in that pain and feel it, that was intense. But I also think it was the most integral part of my healing journey, because we can understand all of this stuff so much, but it's the emotional world that we often struggle to connect from, and that's what gets stuck.
When you talk about the inner child and these parts, what was it like to meet them for the first time and to kind of realize that they were still alive inside of you?
It was weird. And I mean, I facilitate the inner child class all the time in phase 2 in Lyft. And often I just preface it with, like, you guys might think this is like some weird voodoo shit. That's okay. Not everyone has to resonate with it, but once you do, it can be really powerful. But yeah, it's a strange concept to be like, what do you mean I'm going to go visit my 5-year-old self? Like, and I'm going to talk to her? Like, nah. But it was just, it was cool, but it was also just sad, right? Sad to find this 5-year-old girl who's just sitting all alone in a field, feeling really shitty about herself and alone and just having nobody to talk to. So it was just always, I always came out of it feeling relieved, feeling connected because I was able to help her. But every time I found her, just a deep sadness would settle over me, and just really seeing where she was at and how deep the pain had been that I had forgotten about, I think. Because again, I can look back and see myself as a bubbly little kid who loved playing with her friends and doing all of that. But when I would find her in those memories, she was always sad and she was always alone. But I had totally forgotten about that.
How do those parts like help you today in your leadership roles or in professional settings?
Well, they always tell me my authentic self. And I can often find more confidence by connecting with them. So I think like the authentic part is sometimes like in leadership, I'm just not always sure what to do, or I'm worried about this, or I start feeling insecure about myself in that leadership role. And when I can go back to her, she can usually tell me what the right answer is. She's like, "What are you talking about, Breanne? You know this is what we need to do." And I'm like, "Oh yeah." Because adult me gets caught up in all the other things, whereas she's the most authentic version of me. And so often in times of uncertainty, I can connect with her. But I think in times of insecurity, and this is often where her part of wanting everyone to like her shows up. And then me as even as a leader trying to make sure everyone likes me and I'm not upsetting everybody, but that doesn't always work, right? And so often I can go back to her and just say like, "Hey, sweet girl, we've got to do this," or somebody might not like you right now. But again, kind of those messages I was saying before, it doesn't say anything about who you are and we've got this and you're still perfect the way you are, and just affirming her. But so yeah, it can kind of go both ways, the inner child relationship. Sometimes I'm helping her work through something, and sometimes she's showing up with all her innocent confidence and she's telling me like, "We're fine, like we don't need to worry about these things." And she's incredibly cool that way.
Today you help to run the Lyft program, you're the director of the Lyft program, and you're walking others through that same journey. Like, what does it mean to you to be able to offer to others some of these things that you didn't have as a child?
Pretty damn cool. Running the Lyft program, and facilitating groups and, counseling and all of that stuff. It's just really neat because even in days where I'm feeling maybe bogged down or emotionally exhausted, because I do, it can be really heavy work at times. One of my favorite things is to just sit with either a client or a group of clients. I especially love groups because so often you'll just have them sharing like, "I wish I had known this. I wish I had known this 20 years ago." Or the amount of times I've heard people say, like, "I've been through therapy for years and years and years, and all of a sudden this is making so much more sense." Or, yeah, being able to come and say, like, "My relationships have changed. How I parent my children has changed. I feel like so much better as a person." And just every time, like, this work is impactful on people, and just to see how much it can improve people's life, how it can help them release the pain they've been carrying for, I mean, once we had somebody who was 82 years old and he was able to release some pain after 82 years and the freedom that brought him. It's incredible to witness. So yeah, we've had people up to 80, but we also get some young people. And I love also working with young people because they're still so adaptable at that age, right? In their 20s, they don't have 80 years of shit that they have to let go of. They're like, "Okay, I still got to work through this. It's painful, but my brain isn't wired as strongly." And so they just pick up on all these new things and they can so quickly integrate some of the tools in healing and really change their quality of life, which is incredible. I love doing this work.
So, the inner child work, there's a lot of the reparenting that goes with this. And so in doing this work, as you're helping others to reparent, do you find a boomerang effect for yourself as well? Are you still learning and healing and growing?
Oh yes. Sometimes I'll finish a session and laugh because so often whatever a client is bringing to me is exactly what I need to be looking at. And so then I
Mm,
sit there, listen to myself telling them kind of what's going on, what the steps they need to take, or what the underlying wounds are that they're not looking at. And inside my head, I'm going like, really, Breanne? You couldn't have figured this one out for yourself like 3 days ago when it started happening. And again, it's not always that I ignore it. Sometimes I do. But either way, then I often walk out of it. And sometimes it's the clients who are saying like all these things. And I'm like, secretly wanting to take notes because I'm like, that's what I needed to hear. Like, oh, look at that tool you use. I'm going to go try that because I think that was really helpful. So
hmm.
all the time, it's amazing the way, whatever you want to call it, but the universe, it manifests these things. And so often working with people brings exactly what I need to look at to the forefront.
Is there what's part of your younger self that would be the most proud or most shocked by what you're doing now?
Like in terms of like, okay, I think leadership. I
Mm,
remember working for years in restaurants. I'm like, I'm never going to be a leader. I don't want to be a boss.
mm,
I don't want to deal with all this shit. I'm happy to just
hmm.
chill in the background. Somebody can tell me what to do. I'll collect my paycheck and go home. I don't want to lead people or manage or do any of that. So I think that younger version of me would be shocked to see where I am at now because this was not my plan in the least bit.
I want to share something personal here. So you've been my supervisor for 2 years now. So you've been kind of my leader through this journey. And I think one of my most powerful moments, and this is something that I love that I've been able to pass on to other people, but during my training to become a coach and facilitator, after my first recorded session, you were there to review me, and you started by asking me how I thought I did, and so of course like perfectionism, super judging myself, and it's like, you know, on the grand scale, like I did okay, but I really failed. I was like a 45 out of 100 is where I would have ranked myself. And what I loved is like, and I compared myself to Kim and to Debbie, who I had experienced as being two of the better coaches out there with the kindness and nurturing and empathy that they can offer. And so I knew I was no Kim, I knew I was no Debbie. Um, and then I wish I could remember exactly how you worded it because like you looked at me and you essentially it's like, Andy, you're not them. You're like just learning. You're 6 weeks into training. And so what you did was wonderful. That was perfect. That was great. And that was amazing. And you really like as somebody who's learning, like I was never allowed to learn. I always had to get it right the first time and to be perfect. And then it was always, a 99 wasn't perfect. And so it was always about what was wrong. And so this was the first time in my life where I had positive reinforcement instead of just criticism. And it's just amazing like what that changed inside of me, both in what I was able to do as a coach and a facilitator, just really stripping away a ton of the fear and the anxiety and that need to be perfect. And so to let me be me, who I am today, and not have to be this image of me that I may never be. And so that was like, I don't know, that was really powerful and it helped me to be more present. Um, And so I appreciate that leadership that you shared with me.
Mm.
Because I've definitely I say it in a different way to others. I say I'll tell them I don't care uh, about what others think of me, but in a really loving and kind way. But it's like letting go of that perfectionism.
Mhm.
So I want to thank you for that.
Absolutely. I Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that. I think that's really cool because I mean to me it was just common sense to say that because
Mm,
it's true, right? But and again, I think that's where sometimes in the work that we do, um yeah, things that are just common sense now, they're not. They're not to others who come out
mm,
of a world like yours where no, normal is perfectionism. This is all you've ever been exposed to and all you've ever seen. So to be able to hear just some from a different perspective, it's pretty cool.
I want to kind of fast forward more to today. You've done clinical training, you've done all this lived experience and experiential work, you have leadership roles. How do all those mesh together for you today?
They mesh, that's for sure. So yeah, I trained at my first training was at the React Center. Tim had me go out to his center and just train underneath him for 2 months of how to facilitate, how to coach, all of that stuff. And then my next step was going through Gabor Mate's Compassionate Inquiry program. I did the year-long program. So that was basically learning a modality, right? How to actually practice compassionate inquiry with clients, which for those who don't know, it's a very somatic-based approach to getting into your body. And then you can integrate things like inner child work to reparent through old wounds that you discover. And then, yeah, and then I've just finished up my master's degree. So I've spent 2.5 years learning how to be a psychotherapist. And it's really interesting because, I think not a lot, I think it's more and more like kind of a holistic approach is becoming popular. But there are still who, are very, stick with one modality. Like I am a CBT therapist or a DBT therapist or whatever it is. I think the more attuned you are to a client, the more that whatever you need just naturally shows up. Right. So, of course, you still have to do learning because then you kind of have a whole toolbox to pull from. But then I think part of healing from complex trauma is a foundation of that is the relationship and feeling connected with somebody and feeling that somebody actually attunes to you and understands you. And so within that, to be able to say like, okay, we're just going to stick with some, CBT practices. Let's work on your thoughts and your behaviors today versus like, whoa, here's some deep grief. We're just going to sit together in these emotions. We don't have to fix them. We don't have to make them go away, but I'm just going to be present with you. Versus like, oh, hey, look, here's a trigger. Oh, I think we should definitely do some compassionate inquiry because this is connected to your childhood. So let's go through and explore what childhood memory is popping up. So to me, it's just been really neat to have different approaches to work with clients because, as we know, everyone is so different. Everyone's complex trauma story is so different. And to me, really working through the multiple layers of complex trauma, there is no one approach to it. For this wound, you might need this approach, but a month later, they're going to show up with a different wound that needs a different way of looking at it in order to really get into all the complexities of that. So, yeah, it's just been neat to learn a lot and train and work with people and just have more ways to help people in different ways.
Mm. How do you balance professionalism with playfulness and empathy?
Well, depends on the client. But I think playfulness is so important because, again, when it comes like professionalism, 100% important too, right? It's there for a reason. But when it comes to what I was talking about, is that connection is important. You cannot connect with somebody who isn't being authentic also within themselves. And so, yes, I still have my professional boundaries with clients, but I love to play. I love to chat. Like if, I have some clients who I've worked with for a really long time. So sometimes the sessions are just tell me what's up, how's it going? And just giving them a chance to talk versus some days, then we can switch. If something really heavy is coming into the room, then I can put on that more professional hat and be able to meet them where they're at and go through, back to some modalities and some practices. But again, and this is something I learned a lot in my master's, and they emphasize it all the time, is they've done tons and tons of research on all, like, which modality is best, right? Is CBT the theory to go with? Is psychodynamic the theory to go with? And all these studies continue to show that it's the therapeutic relationship that matters. That once you have a safe connection, somebody who sees you, somebody who's present with you, you can use any theory. because the relationship is there. And it goes along with what Gabor Mate always talks about. He says complex trauma isn't in the event itself, it's in the disconnection during that event. So part of healing has to be in reconnection. And that's where, again, you have to develop a connection in a relationship in order to heal. So yeah, play, I say, have fun, just be yourself. And that is really powerful too.
I want to shift here and ask, so you've been the director of Lyft for a while. For people who don't know, what is the Lyft program?
Yes. So Lyft is my baby. So like I said, we have some in-person treatment programs there's a few in Canada and in the States. And so when I was or I was at that point teaching in Surrey, I was teaching once a week, a class on the 60 characteristics, and my sister was the director. And then she went away on holidays and COVID hit. And so she was not around to troubleshoot basically and figure out, like, what do we do? We can't go in person. And so at that time I was like, okay, I'll figure out a solution. And I started converting. Basically, I sat down and said, okay, how can we present this material in an online format, and create programming? And so that's when I sat down and basically created what is now called Lyft. At the time, it was for just this COVID group in the React Center, but I developed the questions to go with the videos and then the discussion points. And so that happened. We got kind of through the initial bump of COVID. She came back, took over directing again. And then my dad's like, well, you know what? We've been thinking about online programming for a while now. So can you keep this momentum going and set up an online program? And so I connected with Shannon, who's the COO, and we sat down and developed what is now Lyft. So what is Lyft? It's a 75 lessons spread out over varying times, depending on which program you join. But it's an opportunity to go through the majority of Tim's kind of main content, right? So what are the characteristics of complex trauma? What are our 12 needs? How do we deal with things like anger? How do we set boundaries? What is shame? All of the big topics we've put into these 75 lessons. And what you do is you watch one of the videos where Tim does the teaching, and then you sit down and answer questions. And they're questions that help you then start connecting the head with the heart, right? Or with the memories and putting the pieces and applying them to your own life. So say you're learning about anger. Well, Tim might teach you about the different kinds of anger, but then the questions are going to ask you, well, what was anger actually like in your home growing up? Or how did you feel when you weren't allowed to be angry? How do you avoid anger? What do you do to get away from it? Whatever it is. So you sit down and really reflect on these questions. And then you go into a group setting. So I know a lot of people are intimidated by the group setting, but I can tell you, after doing this for 5 years now, by the way, we're at our 5-year anniversary, the groups are often the most healing aspect of the program because, again, there's connection. You get to sit with 9 other people who understand, who've been through something similar, who can relate and validate your pain, but also who can bring in fresh perspectives, right? Because often we get stuck in our own story and our own way of viewing our story. But somebody from, your group might share something and you go, oh, I've never thought about it that way. But yeah, that's how I feel too. And so it's a really good way to just kind of expand some awareness, develop connections, and be in a safe environment where you really can practice vulnerability, in order to start the healing journey. So yeah, that is Lyft. And at this point, we've had over 700 people graduate the program in the first 5 years. And let me tell you, like, the first year, like, we started with 4 clients. It was me and a couple other facilitators, and 4 people would show up every day, and that was Lyft. Whereas now we have 72 meetings that run each week. There's 10 people in each meeting, and yes, 8 different programs. There's a lot. So it's really, really grown, but it's just been amazing to see the impact it's had on people.
Yeah, and you shared the impact of like the group dynamic. Like I remember when I went through the program, There was a woman who would talk about her humiliation, and that was something I wasn't ready to see at the time.
Mm.
And so every time that she would bring it up, it would like force me to have to face it and to go through that as well. And I really find that it helps to build empathy just by listening to other people and their stories. How, how would you distinguish like what makes Lyft different from other programs?
Um, I mean, there's a few things, and it's not to say maybe other programs have popped up by now that are similar. But I do think a lot of, especially if you're looking at treatment programs, which a lot of it is, right? A lot of people only go to programming if there's an addiction or something very specific to look at, even right, whether it's like relationships or narcissistic abuse. So the one thing is, especially with addiction programs, it's a lot of tool-based recovery. So if you follow these steps and if you do this, you can stay sober. And I am not bashing those programs because they absolutely have value and have helped many people in recovery. But I do believe when you're just focusing on the tools, relapse prevention and that kind of stuff, it's surface level. Whereas until you look at the underlying things, you're always going to be tempted to drink again or use or whatever. Whereas if you can start to heal the underlying stuff that's causing that surface behavior, that's where you can find the deeper, longer lasting healing. And so within that, like I said, a lot of programs, very specific topic. This is a topic that can apply to almost anyone these days. I think anybody could benefit from taking time to self-reflect, taking time to see how their childhood has impacted their maladaptive behaviors, because none of us are perfect, right? And so this is a very unique program in the sense it's just saying, okay, let's look at all of it. And it brings in all the different tools, but all the different also core wounds and healing. And it does that in a group dynamic. And two, I think, because after you graduate, we have a phase 3. So you can stay connected as long as you need. A lot of programs, when you graduate, it's like, bye, here's your certificate, good job. Whereas we recognize that healing doesn't finish in 6 months. It's a kind of lifelong journey. So we do provide that ongoing community and ongoing support for anyone who wants to keep healing and growing and doesn't want to be alone in it.
Hmm. You mentioned there's 72 groups that are active right now. What's exciting about the direction that Lyft is heading in right now?
I think just, yeah, how big it's becoming, but also how far reaching. Because when we started, it was pretty much a few people from Winnipeg and I think one American who had found Tim on YouTube. Whereas now we have people like we have an entire group for Australians because there's so many there. But we also like somebody reached out the other day from Slovenia. We've had clients from Nigeria, from Colombia, from Japan, like all over the world. And to me, that's huge because everybody can relate to this. And yes, there are different cultural aspects that are always going to play a role, but just how far reaching with the beauty of the internet that the program is, and that anybody who really wants it can access it because we've got different time slots. So there's pretty much almost always an option for anyone if they want to go through.
And if somebody who's listening is wondering whether Lyft is right for them, what would you say to them?
I mean, I think Lyft can be right for almost anybody who wants the healing, but it takes commitment. So I think some people, they do want, we're human. We want a quick fix or kind of an easy solution. So I think it's just, is this right for you? It's right if you're ready to do the work because it is a painful journey. I'm not going to lie. I cried a lot because you do have to uncover the pain that you've been running from your whole life. And so it is right for anyone who is ready and willing to step into that and go through it. And then it can be pretty, shitty at times, but amazing in the end. I had a client just yesterday. She's like halfway through phase 2 and she's like, oh, Breanne, I'm so tired. But that's very like often people enter the, Lyft and it's really exciting at first because all the pieces are coming together. But you do often people hit a dip where they're just like, I can't anymore. I'm so tired. My trauma, I don't want to look at it. But then always, as always, you come out the other end and are grateful you pushed through. But it's just being honest and saying it's hard.
Graduations are my favorite time, and just like looking, well, I'll let you share rather than my opinion about graduations. What do you like about graduations? What do you notice at graduations?
I also love graduations. It's funny because one thing we wish we could do, or we're able to do, is to get a picture of somebody on the day they did their intake, and then to get a picture of them on the day of their graduation, because the almost everybody, there is physical change that happens in them. Their face, their eyes are brighter, their posture is often better. They look more at peace in themselves, or more alive, like whatever it is. So I think basically what we do at graduation is all the facilitators and people who've been part of their journey is they try to reflect that to them. Let them know the changes they've seen them. Let them know the challenges they saw them going through and how they saw them push through and make it through to the other end. And just really mirror back what they see in that person, to mirror their value and just celebrate all the hard work that they did in Lyft. So it's absolutely, I love graduations. My heart is always so full at the end.
Breanne, I want to thank you for sharing with us today. Not just your story, but your honesty, your clarity, and then what I really love, that distinct Breanne flair. And so I know this conversation will resonate with a lot of people who maybe thought they had to be perfect or put together to be loved. And what I really see is that your story gives people permission to be human and also to heal. And so to anyone listening, we'd love to hear what resonated with you. Thanks for being with us today. Until next time, take care.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you for joining us on the Time with Tim podcast. If you'd like to share your own experiences or have questions, feel free to email us at podcasts@timfletcher.ca. Want to learn more about complex trauma? Subscribe to Tim Fletcher's YouTube channel for past lectures and his Friday night Tim Talks. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Looking for more support? We offer programs and courses to help with healing complex trauma and recovering from addictions. Visit timfletcher.ca to learn more or send us an inquiry. We're here to support you. Until we meet again, take care, and thank you for letting us be a part of your healing journey.